The Odyssey, read by Devin Young. Book 4. At Sparta, Telemachus is joyfully received by Menelaus and Helen, who recount stories of Odysseus. Menelaus describes their own many adventures on the return from Troy. He reveals that the god Proteus has told him that Odysseus is a prisoner on Calypso's isle. Back in Ithaca, the suitors, learning of Telemachus's journey, plan to murder him. Penelope hears of it and is terrified. Athena sends a vision to Penelope to assure her that her son will come back safely. Now, when the sun had set and the darkness was over the land, they reached the low-lying city of Sparta, where they drove straight to the abode of Menelaus, and found him in his own house, feasting with his many clansmen in honor of the wedding of his son, and also of his daughter, whom he was marrying to the son of that valiant warrior Achilles. He had given his consent and promised her to him while he was still at Troy, and now the gods were bringing the marriage about. Wow, that's a long time later. So now he was sending her with chariots and horses to the city of the Myrmidons, over whom Achilles' son was reigning. For his only son, he had found a bride from Sparta, the daughter of Alector. This son, Megapenthes, was born to him out of a bondwoman, for heaven vouchsafed Helen no more children after she had burned Hermione, who was as fair as the golden Aphrodite herself. So the neighbors and kinsmen of Menelaus were feasting and making merry in his house. There was a bard also to sing to them and play his lyre, while two tumblers went about performing in the midst of them, when the man struck up with a tune. Telemachus and the son of Nestor stayed in their houses at the gate, whereon Etonius, servant to Menelaus, came out, and as soon as he saw them, ran hurrying back into the house to tell his master. He went up close to him and said, Menelaus, there are some strangers come here, two men who look like sons of Zeus. What shall we do? Shall we take their horses out, or tell them to find friends elsewhere as best they can? That's funny. Menelaus is very angry and said, Etimaeus, son of Boetheus, you never used to be a fool, but now you talk like a simpleton. Take their horses out, of course, and show the strangers in, that they may have supper. You and I have stayed often enough at other people's houses before we got back here, where heaven grant that we may rest in peace henceforth. So Etonius bustled back and bade the other servants come with him. They took their sweating steeds from under the yoke and made them fast to the mangers, and gave them feed of oats and mixed barley. Then they leaned the chariot against the end wall of the courtyard, and led the way into the house. Telemachus and Pisistratus were astonished when they saw it, for its splendor was that of the sun and moon. Then, when they administered everything to their heart's content, they went into the bathhouse and washed themselves. When the servant had washed them and anointed them with oil, they brought them woolen cloaks and shirts, and took to their seats by the side of Menelaus. A maidservant brought them water in a beautiful golden ewer, and poured it into a silver basin for them to wash their hands. And she drew a clean table beside them. An upper servant brought them bread, and offered them many good things of what there was in the house, while the carver fetched them plates of all manner of meat, and set cups of gold by their side. Menelaus then greeted them, saying, Fall to and welcome. When you have done supper, I shall ask who you are, for the lineage of such men as you cannot have been lost. You must be descended from a line of scepter-bearing kings, for poor people do not have sons such as you are. So that's very interesting right there. So basically, remembering your parentage is tied with nobility because it's sort of like a gratitude to your parents for the position you have, so you care to actually know who they are. So I want to learn more of my genealogy for these reasons. I only, I don't know who my father's father was, which is interesting, but I'm also an immigrant, like a descendant of an immigrant, so that's also interesting, but that's, it's still, should probably figure it out to some degree. For poor people do not have sons such as you are, so there's this understanding that requires wealth to raise up healthy, strong people. On this, he handed them a piece of fat roast loin, which had been set near him as being a prime part. And they laid their hands on the good things that were before them. As soon as they had enough to eat and drink, Telemachus said to the son of Nestor, with his head so close that no one might hear, "Look, Pisistratus, a man after my own heart. See the gleam of bronze and gold, of amber and ivory. Everything is so splendid that it is like seeing the palace of Olympian Zeus. I am lost in admiration." So, but back to wealth, though. Like, wealth is basically family. Like, wealth is basically family to look after you and make sure you don't fall into poverty such that you basically sell yourself into slavery, because that's basically what happens if you don't have any family to help you whatsoever. Menelaus overheard him and said, "No one, my sons, can hold his own with Zeus, for his house and everything about him is immortal. But among mortal men, well, there may be another who has as much wealth as I have, or there may not. But all events, I have traveled much and have undergone much hardship, and for it was nearly 8 years before I could get home with my fleet. I went to Cyprus, Phoenicia, and the Egyptians. I went also to the Ethiopians, the Sidonians, and the Emberians, and to Libya, where the lambs have horns as soon as they are born, and the sheep lay 'em down 3 times a year. Everyone in that country, whether master or man, has plenty of cheese, meat, and good milk, for the ewes yield all year round. But while I was traveling and getting great riches among these people, my brother was secretly and shockingly murdered through the wicked perfidy of his wicked wife, so that I have no pleasure in being lord of all this wealth. Whoever your parents may be, they must have told you about all this, and my heavy loss and the ruin of my stately mansion, fully and magnificently furnished. Would that I only had a third of what I have now, and I had stayed at home, and all those living who perished on the plain of Troy far from Argos. I often grieve as I sit here in my house for one and all of them. At times I cry aloud for sorrow, but presently I leave off again. For crying is cold comfort, and one soon tires of it. So, amber is never mentioned in the Iliad. Sicily is probably the only amber producing country known in the Odyssean age. And this is no doubt referred to the story told in the lost poem of Cypria, of how Paris and Helen robbed Menelaus of the greater part of his treasures when they sailed together for Troy. That's interesting. So, oh, what do they say? Bread and death govern everything. Um, Cold comfort, and one soon tires of it. Yet grieve for these as I may, I do so for one man more than for them all. I cannot even think of him without loathing both food and sleep, so miserable does he make me. For no one of all the Achaeans worked so hard or risked so much as he did. He took nothing by it. He left a legacy of sorrow to myself, for he has been gone a long time. We know not whether he is alive or dead. His old father, his long-suffering wife Penelope, and his son Telemachus, whom he left behind him, an infant in arms, are plunged into grief on his account. Thus spoke Menelaus, and the heart of Telemachus yearned as he bethought him of his father. Tears fell from his eyes as he heard him thus mentioned, so that he held his cloak before his face with both hands. When Menelaus saw this, he doubted whether to let him choose his own time for speaking, or to ask him at once and find what it was all about. While he was thus in 2 minds, Helen came down her high vaulted and perfumed room, looking as lovely as Artemis herself. Adraste brought her seat, and Eclipse a soft woolen rug, while Pytho fetched her the silver working box, which Alexandra, wife of Polybus, had given to her. Polybus lived in Egyptian Thebes, which is the richest city in the whole world. He gave Menelaus 2 baths, both of pure silver, both 2 tripods, and 10 talents of gold. Beside all this, his wife Helen gave some beautiful presents, to wit, a golden distaff and a silver wood box that ran on wheels, with a gold band round the top of it. Philo now placed this by her side, full of fine spun yarn. A distaff charged with violet-colored wool was laid upon the top of it. Then Helen took her seat, put her feet up on the footstool, and began to question her husband. "Do we know, Menelaus," she said, "the names of the strangers who have come to visit us? Shall I guess right or wrong, but I cannot help saying what I think. Never yet have I seen either man or woman so like somebody. Indeed, when I look at him, I hardly know what to think, as this man is like Telemachus, whom Odysseus left as a baby behind him, when you Achaeans went to Troy with battle in your hearts, on behalf of my most shameless self. My dear wife, replied Menelaus, I see the likeness just as you do. His hands and feet are just like Odysseus's. So is his hair, with the shape of his head and the expression of his eyes. Moreover, when I was talking about Odysseus and saying how much he suffered on my account, tears fell from his eyes, and he hid his face in his mantle. Then Pisistratus said, Menelaus, son of Atreus, you are right in thinking that this young man is Telemachus. But he is very modest and is ashamed to come here and begin opening up discourse with one whose conversation is so divinely interesting as your own. My father Nestor sent me to escort him hither, for he wanted to know whether you could give him any counsel or suggestion. A son has always trouble at home when his father is gone away, leaving him without supporters. And this is how Telemachus is now placed, for his father is absent, and there is no one among his own people to stand by him. Bless my heart, replied Menelaus. Then I am receiving a visit from the son of a very dear friend, who suffered much hardship for my sake. I have always hoped to entertain him with the most marked distinction, when heaven had granted us safe return from beyond the seas. I should have founded a city for him in Argos, built him a house. I should have made him leave Ithaca with his goods, his son, and all his people, and should have sacked for them some of the neighboring cities that are subject to me. We should thus have seen one another continually, and nothing but death could have interrupted so close and happy an intercourse. I suppose, however, that heaven grudged us such great fortune, for it prevented the poor fellow from getting home at all. Thus did he speak, and his words sent them all weeping. Helen wept, Telemachus wept, and so did Menelaus. Nor could Pisistratus keep his eyes from filling when he remembered his dear brother Antilochus, whom the son of the bright dawn had killed. Therion said to Menelaus, Sir, my father Nestor, when we used to talk about you at home, told me you were a person of rare and excellent understanding. If then it be possible, do as I would urge you. I am not fond of crying while I am getting my supper. Morning will come in due course, and in the forenoon I care not how much I cry for those that are dead and gone. This is all we can do for the poor things. We can only shave our heads for them and wring the tears from our cheeks. I had a brother who died at Troy. He was by no means the worst man there. You are sure to have known him. His name was Antilochus. I have never set eyes upon him myself, but they say that he was singularly fleet of foot and in fight valiant. Your discretion, my friend, answered Menelaus, is beyond your years, and it is plain you take after your father. One can soon see when a man is son to one whom heaven has blessed both as regard wife and offspring. And it has blessed Nestor from the first to last of his days, giving him green old age in his own house, with his sons about him, who are well disposed and valiant. We will put an end, therefore, to all this weeping, and attend to our supper again. Let the water be poured over our hands. Telemachus and I talk with one another fully in the morning. On this Asphilion, one of the servants poured water over their hands, and they laid their hands on the good things that were before them. Then Zeus's daughter Helen bethought her on a different matter. She drugged the wine with an herb that banishes all care, sorrow, and ill humor. Whoever drinks wine thus drugged cannot shed a single tear all the rest of the day, not even though his father and mother, both of them, drop down dead, or he sees a brother or son hewn to pieces before his very eyes. This drug of such powerful sovereign virtue had been given to Helen by Polydamna, wife of Theon, the woman of Egypt, where all grow sorts of herbs, some good to put in the mixing bowl and others poisonous. Moreover, everyone in the whole country is a skilled physician, for they are of the race of Paeon. When Helen had put this drug in the bowl and had told the servants to serve the wine round, she said, and then Paeon is physician to the gods, whose skill in healing is described in the Iliad. Menelaus, son of Atreus, and you, my good friends, sons of the honorable men, which is as Zeus wills, for he is the giver both of good and evil, and can do what he chooses. Feast here as you will, and listen while I tell you a tale in season. I cannot indeed name every single one of the exploits of Odysseus, but I can say what he did was before Troy, and you Achaeans were all sorts of difficulties. He covered himself with wounds and bruises, and dressed himself all in rags, and entered the enemy's city, looking like a menial or beggar, and quite different from what he did when he was among his own people. In this disguise he entered the city of Troy, and no one said anything to him. I alone recognized him, began to question him, but he was too cunning for me. When, however, I had washed and anointed him, and had given him clothes, and after I had sworn a solemn oath not to betray him to the Trojans, till he got back safely to his own camp and to the ships, he told me all the Achaeans meant to do. He had killed many Trojans and got much information before he reached the Argive camp. For all which things the Trojan woman made lamentation, but for my own part I was glad, for my heart was beginning to yearn after my home. And I was unhappy about the wrong that Aphrodite had done me in taking me over there, away from my country, my little girl, and my lawfully wedded husband, who is indeed by no means deficient, either in person or understanding. Then Menelaus said, "All that you have been saying, dear wife, is true. I have traveled much, and have had much to do with heroes, but I have never seen another man as Odysseus. What endurance, too, what courage he displayed within the wooden horse, wherein all the bravest of the Argives were lying in wait to bring death and destruction upon the Trojans. In the Italian insurrection of 1848, 8 young men who were being hotly pursued by the Austrian police hid themselves inside Donatello's colossal wooden horse in the Salon of Puda, and remained there for a week, being fed by their confederates. In 1898, the last survivor was carried around Padua in triumph." Wow, the last survivor was carried around Padua in triumph. Wow, interesting. Um, At the moment you came upon us, some god who wished well to the Trojans must have sent you onto it, and you had Diphibius with you. 3 times did you go all around our hiding place and pat it, and you called our chiefs by his own name and mimicked all of our wives. Diomed, Odysseus, and I, from our seats inside, heard what a noise you made. Diomed and I could not make up our minds whether to spring out then and there, or to answer you from inside, but Odysseus held us all in check, so he sat quite still except Anticlus, who was beginning to answer you. When Odysseus clapped his 2 brawny hands over his mouth and kept them there. In was this that saved us, for he muzzled Anticus till Athena took you away again. "How sad!" exclaimed Telemachus. This was all of no avail to save him, nor yet his own iron courage. But now, sir, be pleased to send us all to bed, that we may lie down and enjoy the blessed boon of sleep. On this Helen told the maidservants to set beds in the room that was in the gatehouse, and to make them good red rugs, and spread coverlets on top of them, with wooden cloaks for the guests to wear. So the maids went out carrying a torch and made the beds, to which a manservant presently conducted the strangers. Thus then did Telemachus and Pisistratus sleep there in the forecount, while the son of Atreus lay in an inner room with lovely Helen by his side. When the child of morning, rosy-fingered Dawn, appeared, Menelaus rose and dressed himself. He bound his sandals on to his comely feet, girded his sword about his shoulders, and left his room looking like an immortal god. Then, taking a seat near Telemachus, he said, "And what, Telemachus, has led you to take this long sea voyage to Sparta? Are you on public or private business? Tell me about it." "I have come, sir," replied Telemachus, "to see if you can tell me anything about my father. I am being eaten out of house and home, my fair estate is being wasted, and my house is full of miscreants who keep killing great number of my sheep and oxen on the pretext of paying their addresses to my mother. Therefore I am suppliant at your knees if haply you may tell me about my father's melancholy end, whether you saw it with your own eyes or heard it from some other traveler, for he was a man born to trouble. Do not soften things and have any pity for myself, but tell me in all plainness exactly what you saw. If my brave father Odysseus ever did you loyal service, either by word or deed, when you Achaeans were harassed by the Trojans, bear it in mind now, as I favor, and tell me truly all." Menelaus, on hearing this, was very much shocked. "So," he exclaimed, "these cowards would usurp a brave man's bed. A hind might well lay her newborn young in the lair of a lion, a hind is a deer, and go off to feed in a forest or in a grassy dell. The lion, when he comes back to his lair, will make short work of the pair of them, and so will Odysseus with these suitors." I love that. Odysseus is going to be like a lion coming back to a den full of deer. "By fathers Zeus, Athena, and Apollo, if Odysseus is still the man he was when he wrestled with Philomedes on Lesbos, and threw him so heavily that all the Achaeans cheered him, if he is still such, and were to come near these suitors, they would have short shrift and a sorry wedding. As regards your questions, however, I will not prevaricate nor deceive you, but will tell you without concealment all the old man of the sea told me. I was trying to come here, but the gods detained me in Egypt, for my hecatombs had not given them full satisfaction. But the gods are very strict about having their dues. Now off Egypt, about as far as a ship can sail in a day with a good stiff breeze behind her, there is an island called Pharos. Has a good harbor from which vessels can get out into open sea when they have taken in water. And here the gods becalmed me 20 days without so much as a breath of fair wind to help me forward. We should have run clean out of provisions, and my men would have starved if a goddess hadn't taken pity on me and saved me in the person of Idathea, daughter of to Proteus, the old man of the sea, for he had taken a fancy to me. She came to me one day when I was by myself, as I often was, for the men used to go with their barbed hooks all over the island in hope of catching fish or two to save them the pains of hunger. Stranger, said she, it seems to me that you like starving in this way. At any rate, it does not greatly trouble you, for you stick here day after day, without even trying to get through. Your men are dying, without trying to get away, though your men are dying by inches. Let me tell you, I said, whichever of the goddesses you may happen to be, that I am not staying of my own accord, but must have offended the gods that live in heaven. Tell me, therefore, for the gods know everything, which of the immortals it is that is hindering me in this way, and tell me also how I may sail the sea so as to reach my home. Stranger, she replied, I will make it quite clear to you. There's an old immortal who lives under the sea hereabouts, whose name is Proteus. He is an Egyptian, and people say that he is my father. He is Poseidon's head man, and knows every inch of the ground all over the bottom of the sea. If you can snare him and hold him tight, he will tell you about your voyage, what courses you are to take, and how you are to sail the sea so as to reach your home. He will also tell you, if you so will, all that has been going on at your house, both good and bad, while you have been away on your long and dangerous journey. Can you show me, said I, some stratagem by means of which I may catch this old god without his suspecting it and finding me out? For a god is not easily caught, not by mortal men. Stranger, said she, I will make it quite clear to you. About the time when the sun shall have reached mid-heaven, the old man of the sea comes up from under the waves, heralded by the west wind that furs the water over his head. As soon as he has come up, he lies down and goes to sleep in the great sea cave, where the seals, Halcyon's chickens as they call them, come up from the gray sea and go to sleep in the shoals all around him. It is very strong and fish-like smell do they bring with them. Early tomorrow morning I will take you to this place and will lay you in ambush. Pick out, therefore, the 3 best men you have in your fleet, and I will tell you all the tricks that the old man will play. First, he will look over all his seals and count them. Then, when he has seen them and tallied them up on his 5 fingers, he will go to sleep among them, as a shepherd among his sheep. The moment you see he is asleep, seize him, put forth all your strength, and hold him fast, for he will do his very utmost to get away from you. He will turn to every kind of creature that goes upon the earth. He will also become both fire and water, and you must hold him and grip him tighter and tighter, till he begins to talk to you and comes back to what he was when you saw him go to sleep. Then you may slacken your hold and let him go, and you can ask him which of the gods it is that is angry with you, and what you must do to reach your home over the seas. Having so said, she dived under the waves, whereupon I turned back to the place where my ships were ranged upon the shore, and my heart was clouded with care as I went along. When I reached my ships, we got supper ready, for night was falling, and camped down upon the beach. When the child of the morning, rosy-fingered Dawn, appeared, I took the 3 men on whose prowess of all kinds I could most rely, and went along the seaside praying heartily to heaven. Meanwhile the goddess fetched me up 4 sealskins from the bottom of the sea, all of them just skinned, for she meant to play a trick on her father. She dug 4 pits for us to lie in, and sat down and wait till we should come up. When we were close to her, she made us lie down the pits one after the other, and threw a sealskin over each of us. Our ambuscade would have been intolerable, for the stench of the fishy seals was most distressing. Who would go to bed with a sea monster if he could help it? But here, too, the goddess helped us, and thought of something that gave us relief. She put ambrosia under each man's nostrils, which was so fragrant that it killed the smell of the seals. We waited the whole morning and made the best of it, watching the seals come up in the hundreds to bask in upon the shore till the noon of the old man of the sea came up too. When he had found his seals fat, when he had found his fat seals, he went over them and counted them. We were among the first he counted, and he never suspected any guile, but laid himself down to sleep soon as he had done the counting. Then we rushed upon him with a shout and seized him, on which he began at once with his old tricks, and changed himself first into a lion with a great mane, then all of a sudden he became a dragon, a leopard, a wild boar. The next moment he was running water, the next he was a tree. But we stuck to him and never lost hold, till at last the cunning old creature became distressed. Which of the gods was it, son of Atreus, that hatched this plot for you for snaring me and seizing me against my will? What do you want? You know that yourself, old man. You will gain nothing by trying to put me off, because I have been kept so long on this island. Tell me, and see no signs of being able to get away. I am losing all heart. Tell me then, for you gods know everything, which of the immortals it is that is hindering me, and tell me also how I may sail the sea so as to reach my home. Then he said, if you would finish your voyage and get home quickly, you must offer sacrifices to Zeus and to the rest of the gods before embarking, for it is decreed that you shall not get back to your friends and to your own house till you have returned to the heaven-fed stream of Egypt and offered holy hecatombs to the immortal gods that reign in heaven. When you have done this, they will let you finish your voyage. I was heartbroken when I heard that I must go all the way back in the long, terrible voyage to Egypt. Nevertheless, I answered, I will do all, old man, that you have laid upon me. But now tell me, and tell me true, whether the Achaeans whom Nestor and I left behind us when we set sail from Troy have got home safely, or whether any one of them came to a bad end, either on board his own ship or among his friends, when the days of fighting were done. Son of Atreus, he answered, why ask me? You had better not know what I can tell you, for your eyes will surely fill when you have heard my story. Many of those about whom you ask are dead and gone, but many still remain. Only two chief among the Achaeans perished during their return home. As for what happened on the field of battle, you were there yourself, and the third Achaean leader is still alive at sea, but hindered from returning. Ajax was wrecked, for Poseidon drove him onto the great rocks of Gyrne. Nevertheless, he let him get safe out of the water. In spite of all Athena's hatred, he would have escaped death if he had not ruined himself by boasting. He said the gods could not drown him, even though they had tried to do so. When Poseidon heard this large talk, he seized his trident in his two brawny hands and split the rock of Gyrne in two. The base remained where it was, but the part on which Ajax was sitting fell headlong into the sea and carried Ajax with it, so he drank salt water and was drowned. Your brother and his ships escaped, for Hera protected him, and when he was just about to reach the high promontory of Malea, he was caught by a heavy gale, which carried him out to sea sorely against his will, and drove him to the foreland, where Thyestes used to dwell, but where Aegisthus was then living. By and by, however, it seemed as though he was to return safely after all, for the gods backed the wind into its old quarter, and they reached home. Whereon Agamemnon kissed his native soil and shed tears of joy at finding himself in his own country. Now there was a watchman whom Aegisthus kept away on the watch, and whom he had promised 2 talents of gold. This man had been looking out for a whole year to make sure that Agamemnon did not give him the ship and prepare for war. When, therefore, this man saw Agamemnon go by, he went and told Aegisthus, who at once began to lay a plot for him. He picked 20 of his bravest warriors and placed them in an ambuscade on one side of the cloister, while on the opposite side he prepared a banquet. Then he sent his chariots and horsemen to Agamemnon, and invited him to the feast, but he meant foul play. He got him there, all unsuspicious of the doom that was awaiting him, and killed him when the banquet was over, as though he was butchering an ox in shambles. Not one of Agamemnon's followers was left alive, nor yet one of Aegisthus, but they were all killed there in the cloisters. Thus spoke Proteus, and I was broken-hearted as I heard him. I sat down upon the sands and wept. I felt as though I could no longer bear to live or look upon the light of the sun. Presently, when I had my fill of weeping and writhing upon the ground, the old man of the sea said, Son of Atreus, do not waste any more time crying so bitterly. It can do no manner of good. Find your way home as fast as ever, for Aegisthus may still be alive, even though Orestes has been beforehand with you in killing him. You may yet come in for his funeral. On this I took comfort in spite of my sorrow, and said, I know then about these two. Tell me, therefore, about the third man of whom you spoke. Is he alive, but at sea, and unable to get home, or is he dead? Tell me, no matter how much it may grieve me. The third man, he answered, is Odysseus, who dwells in Ithaca. I can see him in the island, sorrowing bitterly in the house of the nymph Calypso, who is keeping him prisoner, for he cannot reach his home, for he has no ship or sailors to take him over the sea. As for your own end, Menelaus, you shall not die in Argos, but the gods will take you to the Elysian plain, which is at the ends of the world. There fair-haired Rhadamanthus reigns, and men lead an easier life than anywhere in the world. So that's Rhadamanthus is one of the judges of the dead. For in Elysium there falls not rain, nor hail, nor snow, but Oceanus breathes ever with a west wind that sings softly from the sea and gives fresh life to all men. This will happen to you because you have married Helen, our Zeus's son-in-law. As he spoke, he dived under the waves, whereupon I turned back to the ships with all my companions, and my heart was clouded with care as I went along. When we reached the ships, we got supper ready, for night was falling, and camped down upon the beach. When the child of morning, rosy-fingered dawn, appeared, we drew our ships into the water and put our masts and sails within them. Then we went on board ourselves, took our seats on the beaches, and smote the grey sea with our oars. I again stationed my ships in the heaven-fed stream of Egypt, and offer hecatombs that were full and sufficient. When I had thus appeased heaven's anger, I raised a barrow to the memory of Agamemnon, that his name might live forever, after which I had a quick passage home, for the gods sent me a fair wind. And now yourself, stay here some 10 or 12 days longer, and I will speed you on your way. I'll make you a noble present of a chariot and 3 horses, and I'll also give you a beautiful chalice that is so long that you may that so long as you may live, you may think of me whenever you drink offerings to the immortal gods. Son of Atreus, replied Telemachus, do not press me to stay longer. I should be content to remain with you another 12 months. I find your conversation so delightful that I would never once wish myself at home with my parents. My crew who I am left at Pylos are already impatient, and you are detaining me from them. As for any present you may be disposed to make me, I'd rather it should be a piece of plate. I will also take no horses back with me to Ithaca, but leave them to adorn your own stables. For you have much flat ground in your kingdom, where lotus thrives, and also meadows sweet, wheat and barley and oats, with white and spreading ears. Whereas in Ithaca we have neither open fields nor race courses. It is a country more fit for goats than horses, and I like it the better for that. None of our islands have much level ground suitable for horses, in Ithaca least of all. He's basically telling Menelaus that it's not worth it to try to conquer Ithaca. He's saying, stay here, my boy, and I'll give you a really nice car. You can drive my car, you drive this car around while I go back and conquer your kingdom. And he's like, no, actually, it's not good for being conquered because of the geography, and I have to leave. There's so much of this. I love this. Menelaus smiled and took Telemachus' hand within his own. What you say, said he, shows that you come of good family. I both can and will make this exchange for you. I am giving you the finest, most precious piece of plate in all my house. It is a mixing bowl by Hephaestus' own hand of pure silver, except the rim, which is inlaid with gold. Phydemus, the son of the Sidonians, gave it to me in the course of a visit which I paid him when I returned thither on my homeward journey. I will make you a present of it. He's basically saying, I'm going to see you again. Thus did they converse while guests kept coming to the king's house. They brought sheep and wine, while their wives had put up bread for them to take with them. So they were busy cooking their dinners in the courts. Meanwhile, in Ithaca, the suitors are throwing discs or aiming with spears at a mark on the level ground in front of Odysseus' house, and were behaving with their old insolence. Antinous and Eurymachus, who were the ringleaders and much the foremost among them, were sitting together when Nomon, son of Phoreus, came up and said to Antinous, have we any idea, Antinous, on what day Telemachus returns from Pylos? He has a ship of mine, and I want it to cross over to Elis. I have 12 brood mares there, with yearling mule foals by their side, not yet broken in. I want to bring one of them over here and break him. They were astounded when they heard this, for they had to make sure that Telemachus had not gone to the city of Neleus. They thought he was only away somewhere on the farms and was with the sheep or swineherds. So Antinous said, when did he go? Tell me truly. What young man did he take with him? Were they freemen or his own bondsmen? For he might manage that too. Tell me also, did you let him have a ship of your own free will, because he asked you? Or did you take it without your leave? I lent it him, answered Noemon. What else could I do when a man of his position said he was in a difficulty and asked me to oblige him? I could not possibly refuse. As for those who went with him, they were the best young men we have. I saw Mentor go on board as captain, or some god who looked exactly like him. I cannot understand it, for I saw Mentor here myself yesterday morning, and yet he was setting out for Pylos. Noemon went back to his father's house, but Antinous and Eurymachus are very upset. So the suitors just kind of morons. Like, they just there's obviously gods at work here, man. Like, pay attention. You saw him leave for Pylos, and yet he's here. Think. Noemon then went back to his father's house, but Antinous and Eurymachus are very angry. They told the others to leave off playing and to come sit down along with themselves. When they came, Antinous, son of Eurypithides, spoke in anger. His heart was black with rage, and his eyes flashed fire. He said, "Good heavens, the voyage of Telemachus is a very serious matter. We had made sure that he would come to nothing. But the young fellow has got away in spite of us and has picked a crew too. He will be giving us trouble presently. May Zeus take him before he is full grown. Find me a ship, therefore, with a crew of 20 men, and I will lie in wait for him in the straits between Ithaca and Same. He will then rule the day he set out and try to get news of his father." Thus did he speak, and the others applauded him, saying, Then all of them went inside the building. So, yeah, they're just going to try to kill Telemachus. It was not long ere Penelope came to know what the suitors were plotting, for a manservant, Medon, overheard them from outside the outer court, as they were laying their schemes within, and went to tell his mistress. As he crossed the threshold of her room, Penelope said, "Medon, what have the suitors sent you here for? Is it to tell the maids to leave their master's business and cook dinner for them? I wish that they may neither woo nor dine henceforward, neither here nor anywhere else. But let this be for the last time, for the waste you make of my son's estate. Do not your fathers tell you when you were children how good Odysseus had been to them? Never doing anything high-handed, nor speaking harshly to anybody. Kings may say things sometimes, and they may take fancy to one man, dislike another, but Odysseus never did an unjust thing by anybody, which shows what bad hearts you have, and that there is no such thing as gratitude left in this world." Then Menon said, "I wish, madame, that this were all, but they are plotting something much more dreadful now, and may heaven frustrate their design. They are going to try to murder Telemachus as he is coming home from Pylos or Sparta, where he has been to get news of his father." Then Penelope's heart sank within her, for she was a long time speechless. Her eyes filled with tears, and she could find no utterance. At last, however, she said, "Why did my son leave me? What business had he to go sailing off in ships that make long voyages over the ocean like seahorses? Does he want to die without leaving anyone behind to keep up his name?" "I do not know," answered Medon, "whether some god sent him on it, or whether he went to his own impulse to see if he could find out if his father was alive or dead or on his way home." Then he went downstairs again, leaving Penelope in agony of grief. There were plenty of seats in the house. She had no heart for sitting on any one of them. She could only fling herself on the floor in her own room and cry, whereon all the maids in the house, both young and old, gathered round her and began to cry too, till at last, in a transport of sorrow, she exclaimed, "My dears, heaven is pleased to try me with more affliction than any other woman my age or country. First I lost my brave and lion-hearted husband, who had every good quality under heaven, and whose name was great all over Hellas and middle Argos. And now my darling son is at the mercy of the winds and waves, without having heard one word about his leaving home. You hussies! There was not one of you who would so much as think of giving me a call out of my bed, though you all of you know very well when he was starting. If I had known he meant taking this voyage, he would have had to give it up, no matter how much he was bent on it, or leave me a corpse behind him, one or the other. Now, however, go some of you and call old Ilias, who was given to me by my father on my marriage, and who is my gardener. Bid him to go at once and tell everything to Laertes, who may be able to hit on some plan for enlisting public sympathy on our side, as against those who are trying to exterminate his own race and that of Odysseus." So she still doesn't really get it. Like, there's nothing else you can do. Then the dear old nurse Eurycleia, "You may kill me, madame, or let me live in your house, whichever you please, but I'll tell you the real truth. I knew all about it, and I gave him everything he wanted in the way of bread and wine. But he made me take a solemn oath that I would not tell you anything for some 10 or 12 days unless you asked or happened to hear of his having gone, for he did not want you to spoil your beauty." So it says right here, the rampart or body of the house is 2 stories high and contained, among other things, women's apartments and a storeroom for valuable treasure. Crying, "Now, madame, wash your face, change your dress, and go upstairs to your maids to offer prayers to Athena, the daughter of Aegis-bearing Zeus, for she can save him even though he be in the jaws of death. Do not trouble Laertes, he has trouble enough already. Besides, I cannot think that the gods hate the race of the son of Asterius so much. But there will be a son left to come up after him, and inherit both the house and the fair fields that lie far around it. With these words she made her mistress leave off crying, and dried the tears from her eyes. Penelope washed her face, changed her dress, and went upstairs with her maids, then put some bruised barley into a basket and began praying to Athena. Hear me, she cried, daughter of Aegis-bearing Zeus, unweariable. If ever Odysseus, while he was here, burned you fat thigh bones of sheep or heifer, bear in mind now as my favor, and save my darling son from the villainy of the suitors. She cried aloud as she spoke, and the goddess heard her prayer. Meanwhile, the suitors were clamorous throughout the covered cloister, and one of them said, the queen is preparing for her marriage with one or other of us. Little did she dream that her son has now been doomed to die. This is what they said, but they did not know what was to happen. Then Antinous said, comrades, let there be no loud talking, lest some of it get carried inside. But he's an idiot. He doesn't realize it's already happened. Let us be up and do that in silence, about which we are all of a mind. He then chose 20 men and went down to the ship, to the seaside, drew a vessel into the water, got her mast and sails inside. They bound the oars to the thole pins with twisted thongs of leather, and in due course, and spread the white sails aloft, while their fine servants brought them their armor. Then they made the ship fast a little way out, come on shore again, got their suppers, and waited until night should fall. But Penelope lay in her own room upstairs, unable to eat or drink, and wondering whether her brave son would escape or be overpowered by the wicked suitors. Like a lioness caught in the toils of the huntsman hemming her on every side, she thought and thought till she sank into a slumber and lay on her bed bereft of thought and motion. Then Athena bethought her of another matter, and made a vision in the likeness of Penelope's sister Epitheme, daughter of Icarius, who had married Eumelus and lived in Phaerae. She told the vision to go to the house of Odysseus and to make Penelope leave off crying. So it came to her room by a hole through which the thong went for pulling the door to, and hovered over her head, saying, you are asleep, Penelope. The gods who live at ease will not suffer you to weep and be so sad. Your son has done them no wrong, so he will yet come back to you. That's nice. The gods are sending her a vision, I believe. Penelope was sleeping sweetly at the gates of dreamland, answered, that's fascinating. Answered, sister, why have you come here? You do not come very often, but I suppose that this is because you live such a long way off. Am I then to leave off crying and refrain from all sad thoughts that torture me? I who have lost my brave and lion-hearted husband, who had every good quality under heaven, whose name was great all over Hellas and Middle Argos, and now my darling son has gone off on board a ship. A foolish fellow who has never been used to roughing it or going among gatherings of men. Oh, jeez, no wonder you had to leave her. Kind of babying him, had to get out from under her wing. I am even more anxious about him than my husband. I am all in a tremble when I think of him, lest something should happen to him, either by the people among whom he has gone or by sea, for he has many enemies who are plotting against him and are bent on killing him before he can return home. So she just thinks that they're going to kill him when he leaves. She really doesn't have faith in him. Then the vision said, take heart and be not so dismayed. There is one gone with him whom many men would be glad to have stand by his side. I mean Athena. It is she who has compassion upon you, and she who has sent me to bear you this message. Then, said Penelope, if you are a god or have been sent here by divine commission, tell me also that unhappy one. Is he alive, or is he already dead in the house of Hades? The vision said, I shall not tell you for certain whether he is alive or dead, and there is no use in idle conversation. Oh, jeez. Then it vanished through the thong hole of the door and dissipated into thin air. Penelope rose her sleep, refreshed and comforted. So vivid had been her dream. Meantime, the suitors went on board and sailed their way over the sea, intent on murdering Telemachus. Now there is a rocky islet called Asterius, of no great size, in mid-channel between Ithaca and Same, and there is a harbor on either side of it where a ship can lay. Here then the Achaeans placed themselves in ambush.